Welcome to the Ask Faleskini podcast with a guest. I'm proud to present Juli Lassow from Greater Minneapolis-St. Paul's area. Julie has dedicated herself to supporting retailers and suppliers in finding, developing products, and better negotiating with each other. To truly thrive, product businesses must be powered by amazing supplier partnerships, which energize their business values. She's passionate about developing retail partnership, and she is known for delivering sourcing and negotiation strategies that enhance sales, profit, and collaboration. Julie, please tell us more about yourself. What is your story?
Well, thank you so much for having me first to start, Peter. I really appreciate it. I'm excited to be connecting with your audience. Happy to tell a little bit more about my story. As you shared, I'm currently in the consulting space. I work primarily with retailers and suppliers to build and deliver amazing products, own brand, private label, national brand products to the virtual and digital shelves throughout all of the US. And I do have a couple clients that are abroad as well. And this is a passion that really started for me when I started my professional career. I worked in a gas station or a convenience store when I was in high school, and I had the opportunity to work in a grocery warehouse through college. And then when I graduated from university, I started to work at Target stores in the US. And I was very fortunate to work there for 17 years. But really at this point, it's multi-decades now in the retail spaces of all kinds. And the work that I really gravitated towards when I was working at Target was this partnerships space. And I understand and really developed an interest in and a respect for partnerships that went deeper. And I found that you saw stronger business results when you had partners that were communicating very clearly with each other in a certain amount of transparency. They could be strategic together. They could both work together to effectively execute those strategies and plans. And they were able to work together through challenges and changes, which in retail is sort of the constant. It's always changing. And that's what I'm very passionate and very grateful to describe as my work today is very much in that space.
Yeah, I'm really thrilled to have you on this podcast so that we can explain ins and outs of retail industry. There are so many business people in US and all over the world that are developing a product and they would like to sell it in retail because there is still this mantra in US: if you make $1 of each inhabitant of US, you're a multimillionaire.
Yes, you are.
And the easiest way, or the most straightforward way, it seems, that is through retail industry. I do
I think
believe.
that's an interesting perspective. There's something that Seth Godin speaks to as a gatekeeper, and how in the past, whether that was the publishing industry, only a certain number of books got chosen. I think that's similar to the aspect of retail, that the gateway to, or the toll gate for getting a product into consumers' hands for the longest time was a retailer. And I think we're fortunate for those entrepreneurs and those creators in the world. If you can make a product that there's a consumer market fit for and people are interested in, you are able to test that concept out without having to go through the toll gate or the gatekeeper of a retailer. You can sell that business direct consumer, and it's becoming easier and easier to scale, get input, get ideas, and then also have systems and tools that can support you as you're learning so much about what that product can bring, what it can offer. And those tools can help you scale very, very quickly. And if your dream is to someday be in a mass or specialty retailer or grocer, that's fantastic. But you can also learn a lot so that that dream doesn't turn into a nightmare if you go into the wrong retailer at the wrong time without the right strategies. And unfortunately, I have seen that happen.
So if I understand correctly, you should. So every entrepreneur should test the water outside retail market, and then when they're really ready and where their processes are set, they should then, even only then, they should approach retailers.
Yes, I think directionally that is right. And I would say that you are able to test not only your processes, but proof of market, what's of interest. Because any retailer is going to want to know how how your item sells now, how it resonates, and what are your growth plans, and how do you look to scale. So if you're moving from a direct consumer business, even some of the largest direct consumer businesses in the world, in the US, have very modest sales when you compare them to what they could get being sold wholesale at some of the larger retailers. Now, there's certainly exceptions to that. But often if you're jumping from a small business or a small chain to a larger distribution chain, in addition to the processes to scale, you also need partners to scale and investment and collateral to scale as well.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned digital shelves
Yes.
you start that. That's something I'm really passionate about, and I would like to know your take, the difference between, let's say, digital shelf in established retailer and just putting an ad on Amazon or on eBay.
Just scribbling the note down to make sure I answer your question. So at an established retailer, digital, depending on when the retailer was established, I'll say it this way, but more of a legacy retailer, the digital shelves were an add-on. They had stores, they had physical space long before the internet was influencing how people shopped, bought, sold products. So there are companies that you can still sort of see those divisions and those separate entities, that the online experience is very different from the in-store experience. But really phenomenal resources, really phenomenal retailers set a much higher bar, and it doesn't matter where their consumers choose to shop with them, where their journey begins. They have a very seamless on-brand experience that inevitably drives an increased amount of sales. So when I think about the digital shelves, it's interesting to think about, what are you offering? What's important to your customer, where they want to shop? Are they exploring online first before they choose to go into store and purchase something? Or are they online first from a convenience perspective? So for example, in my house, we'll build out a list of things that we want to buy from Target, for example. So I might have that list built out in my shopping cart, but we're going to end up driving past a Target on the way home. So then I can just use that list now as my laid out store map. So I can go right to the right shelves, grab everything quickly and leave. Or if we're running that day and I don't have time to do a shop, then I can just hit buy and have the product ready for either pickup or have it shipped to me. So those are both digital experiences. Target's been very thoughtful about how they set them up, but depending on how I want to approach shopping for that specific set of transactions, I'm able to do it however I want. When I think about an Amazon or an eBay that are almost, or initially, very digitally centric, Amazon, of course, is growing in the reverse way of some of the more legacy retailers where they were online only to start. They've optimized that experience, and how they really optimize it all is about the lowest price and choice. So making sure that for their consumer who's shopping there first, that they're making it as easy for the consumer to find what they're looking for. Increasingly, it's becoming easier to find things like Amazon Basics as Amazon continues to expand and shift their priorities. But now Amazon has also put a few steps forward in the physical space. So whether that was their purchase of Whole Foods, where they now have that physical grocery store, and they are looking at opportunities to build out their Amazon Fresh platform, they're still learning a lot about what does it look like to entice an Amazon core customer in the real world, or in person, or in a store. Because we have seen some of the tests that they've gone after fold or not expand as quickly as they'd like. So in the Minneapolis area where I'm based, there was a series of Amazon Fresh stores where the leases were there, the buildings were secure, the properties were starting to be built out. And then Amazon decided not to go forward with building out their stores, which we know Amazon has the capital and the ability to grow and scale very, very quickly if they want. So for them to pause on this means that they've either learned something about the fresh concept, or they've learned something about the Minneapolis market that's telling them to pause. So there's still some things that they're learning about the physical space. So I think bringing it back to your original question of just talking about the digital shelves, I think depending on the type of retailer you are, where you started, and what your consumers' experiences are, the best retailers will really think about how those digital shelves complement any other shopping that's being done. And based on those retailers, you see a variety of different strategies in how they approach it.
Thank you. I just have another question. You mentioned
Please.
that Amazon, regardless of all the resources they have available, they have some stalls or even setbacks with their
Mhm.
accessing the market with the physical stores. What would you speculate is their biggest shortcoming, especially in know-how? Because you said that the legacy retailer, that they have built this
Mhm.
know-how over decades. What would you say that is the biggest shortcoming of Amazon, for example, in your area?
My observation, and I have not consulted directly for Amazon, so this is in my space outside of the organization, is that Amazon optimized for speed and scale. They're very technology centric in their strategies, all in service of supporting their customer. Because they were scaling so quickly, and you think of the millions and millions of dollars that go through Amazon's selling platforms every year, it's very clear that they had to be able to move quickly. And so the human element, the human retail element at Amazon, is very focused in supporting technology. I grew up at Target professionally, and Target, as some of your listeners may know, was once part of the Dayton Hudson Corporation, which was a legacy department store retailer. And so for a long time, Target had a great deal of grounding, and I would say still has an element of grounding in those department store roots, where you've got a merchant who's thinking about a product assortment, is thinking about the guest, and which is what Target calls their customers, in a very thoughtful and purposeful way. The phrasing in retail is sometimes called the merchant prince, or the idea that you've got this merchant perspective that sort of trumps many of the concerns across the organization. Whatever the merchant says kind of goes, because the merchant is empowered to really know the customer and put together the assortment that will delight them. And there are certainly limitations to that perspective. And I think Target certainly has evolved from those department store roots, when merchants and merchandising was the end all be all in all decisions. But I think you can still see elements of that in the work that they do. It's now augmented by technology. It's augmented by businesses that are not directly part of merchandising. But I think you can see, when you compare those two business models, or the approaches, when you look at a physical space, it's clear that the Amazon for organization did not grow up as a merchant first organization. It grew up very customer centric and technology centric, so that they could scale so quickly. But when they are looking to open stores or make engaging shopping experiences in person, that is a place where they seem to struggle. So the Amazon style concepts haven't been as strong. But even grocery, which I think some people would argue you have less need of a merchant vision in the way you would in apparel or home spaces, even their grocery businesses hasn't scaled and grown the way other parts of their businesses have, that they've tested and been able to grow with much success very quickly.
Would you agree with my thesis that if you go into something new, you need a couple of years to develop and to gain first-hand experiences? Because you can purchase some knowledge, and you can purchase market research, but on the end, you have to do some things on your own, and there's this trial and error period. And if you persevere, in 5 years, you will gain enough experience to be able to do it on your own. And Amazon was just trying to jump through that, because it's like with the computer code. You just purchase a model from someone else, and it works instantly. And you mentioned that they are really tech focused company. Do you think that this could also be a problem, or at least I identify that as a problem, because you need some things just take time, and they would like just to purchase it and skip it and buy time. And I believe retail is an industry where you cannot skip steps. You can make them faster, but you cannot skip them.
Yes, I agree with your premise that there are certain things you cannot skip. You need to experience. When you started out the question, I think you referenced a couple of years, which I would say is probably too long in retail. There's certain businesses that you will learn and iterate from in a matter of weeks and months that will give you enough insights to continue to grow and scale. You certainly want to balance moving too quickly and investing too deeply in a way that keeps you from being able to be flexible and nimble. And I do think that Amazon has demonstrated that they are willing to invest and move quickly, as well as maybe a shortcut isn't a phrase that I would have used, but I would say maybe they didn't fully weight some of the resources that they needed in order to get the data they needed to prove out their theories. So I think, again, in the physical space. So I imagine that when they built out the fixtures, when even when they broke ground or took over the rental spaces where the properties were built, I imagine that was fairly well researched. When it came to how do you put the product on the shelves, or how much are we investing in, or how are we thinking about putting an assortment together, that was the place where resources do not appear to have been allocated in a way that really gave them the insights to be able to get the sales results they're looking for and grow and scale quickly. So there's some places where I have every confidence they went deep and did their research, and there's others that they chose not to prioritize in the same way. And my conclusion is that in some of those places, that's what kept them from getting insights that would have made them see a runaway success that they would have been really excited to pursue and grow further.
Would you agree with another thesis of mine that there's a
Please.
limited number of people that can project manage projects like this, and a limited number of people that are successful in retail, either as employee or as managers there? And this pool is limited, and people would not just switch to Amazon because it's structured a bit different than a typical retailer. So
you had three different premises built into that. I'll go in reverse order. So that Amazon is built different than other places. Yes, I would absolutely agree with that. There's a culture around Amazon of what it prioritizes, how it prioritizes success, both for the organization, for the customer, for the people that work there. And that's very unique to Amazon. You were building up to, but didn't explicitly say, so maybe I'll push your thesis just a bit, that people shouldn't necessarily flock there. I think Amazon is a very exciting retail experience, and I do know people that find their careers at Amazon to be very challenging and invigorating, but it is a challenging place to work. But I would say broadly, you are going to find retail to be a challenging place to work in some cases. It's fast moving, it's not consistent, the demands are ever increasing. There's always something that you've got to learn from, pivot from. So there's a lot of resilience that's required throughout retail. So I'll say that broadly, it's not unique to Amazon to have a very specific culture and have parts of their culture that are challenging. And the same could be said for most retailers, but what's found to be challenging, what's found to be invigorating, depend greatly on the culture and the leadership that are at those organizations. As far as a limited number of people that are able to be successful, I think that's a very interesting question, because I have encountered people throughout my career who have grown up in different types of retail and have had bring different experiences to the table, or grown up in different industries and bring different perspectives to the table. And I think increasingly we're finding that throughout whatever workforce you're in, having a diversity of thought and a diversity of experiences is a way to build a stronger strategy and a more successful strategy overall. So I do think that being open to different experiences is something that can be helpful, because if you've been around the old guard and you're doing the same thing that you've always done, or you grew up in an organization that didn't try to innovate, it doesn't matter if you've been in retail for 30 years, you might not have the experience and the insights to build a really successful strategy. So I think that there are a lot of people that could be successful in retail, but I think the challenge of their leadership team and the organizations in general is to create a culture of knowing what are the types of experiences that will be valuable, or being open to learning about new experiences and expertise that someone might bring to the table, and having those people set up to be successful within the organization to bring those ideas forward. And it's not an easy balance to strike, either culturally or from a strategic perspective, but really strong leaders and organizations with strong cultures are finding ways to do that. And then the first question you had asked, are the limited amount of people that would be able to project manage a massive amount of, we'll call it a transformation or a massive initiative. And I also think that's an interesting skill set. I see an incredible amount of value in a very strong project manager. It's certainly part of the work that I do today, is organizing not only the strategy, but the approach to understand the steps that need to come together and the people that need to come together and the decisions that need to be made to keep a large scale project moving forward. That is a very specific skill set. And it's a lot of fun when you've got the resources to be able to put that plan together, and the support and the mandate in an organization to move that type of work forward. I would say as important as a project manager, an effective project manager would be in this process, like any major process or project, it's also incredibly important that you've got the right level of leadership advocacy and stakeholders that are able to support your work and help keep that work moving forward. Because if you're driving a transformation of any kind, there's an element of change management. There's an element of risk and concern. And that team, the working team, needs the support of a leadership team to help make sure that resources and insights are available to keep that project moving forward and to pivot where it needs to, because it absolutely will.
Thank you. I would also like another opinion on one of my thesis, and this is
Please.
that retail has developed into a really elaborate and high-tech industry, and as such, people are really specialized. Okay, the clerk behind the counter is something, but people that for example, you worked at Target, that there are so many departments, there are so many details that needs to be taken care of, and it's a very complex system. And I see with the entrepreneurs, even experienced entrepreneurs, they have really low level of understanding of all retail mechanisms, how it works, how procedures are done, how contracts are done, how financing is done, how testing is done in the beginning, how supplies, all the logistic and procurement behind it. And I see the most of, let's say, business community has really low level of understanding. Why would you say that there is such a low level of understanding, even if a retail market is such a huge opportunity? And as I mentioned before, in US, it's common to say if you can sell product for $1 to every US citizen, you have almost $300 million. Why do you think that this is such a huge market, and it's working? It has some ups and downs, but why the general public and common entrepreneurs have such a low level of understanding of the whole retail?
Well, I'll answer that in two parts. So one, why is it such a huge market? I think that's a fairly straightforward piece to answer. I think as we came into the industrial age, factory owners, brand owners, et cetera, quickly realized that they could make a lot more things than people had the capacity to buy. So those factory managers and the brand owners that owned the factories really changed the concept of what it meant to have enough in the United States. And so you used to have 1 or 2 pairs of jeans, for example, and you wore one and you washed one. So maybe 3, you wore one, washed one, had one on the shelf. Now people have a dozen pairs, or shoes, or pick within apparel. Think about the homes that we live in now and how those compare to 2 decades ago. And that transition has been very, very successful in the US and elsewhere to change that definition of what it meant to have enough to be quote unquote comfortable. And when it was well beyond often what we need to certainly survive or be comfortable. Like the percent of clothes that aren't worn in closets is stunning, that some that are thrown away after just being worn once or twice. And it's true about appliances in your kitchen. And so I think consumerism in general it creates the demand within the retail space. And that's why people do get excited about the idea of 300 million customers that you're able to tap into, because it's pretty clear that 300 million customers to some extent are interested in buying things in the US. And so you don't need to connect with too many of them to build a really successful business. So I think that's why people broadly and entrepreneurs specifically are excited about being in the retail space. To answer your question around what's driving a low level of understanding in the complexity of what it means to be within the retail space, I think there are parts of retail that are shockingly straightforward, and there are some that are becoming increasingly complex. And I think broadly, retail is becoming more and more complex, which I think was your original premise. I think you're absolutely right. It's becoming complex in how you make products that are safe and are high quality. We're testing more and more. We're learning about different types of materials and how well they work, how they might impact the environment, how they're packaged. And so legally, it's just becoming much more challenging to make products that can be sold. And so that's an incredibly important piece to understand, but it's highly complex. There's always a lot of changes going on in the US. There's different regulations by state on how products can be made, sold, used, disposed of. And that's true of their packaging as well. And so when you start thinking about scaling that internationally, that level of complexity continues to increase at an exponential rate. But I think also the complexity that we're seeing expand in the more recent years is just the availability of data. Like I almost smile now and think it was sort of quaint about how much or how little data I had when I was building out purchase orders and understanding how much I wanted to buy of a certain product and the data I had at my disposal versus the highly, highly sophisticated language models and learning models that are available now as retailers are able to leverage AI to engage with consumers and gain new information about people who aren't even consumers yet, who are just thinking about buying product. That's also starting to inform buying patterns. And it isn't something that you can just hold in your head anymore, if that makes sense. You have to leverage external resources and data analytics. And like I said, increasingly more automated ways of processing that data and coming to conclusions that can help inform those business decisions. So I think those are just two examples, legislative and then the use of data that make retail very, very complicated. And I'm not even touching on store operations or logistics, the making of product, the shipping of product, the storing it, and then even the selling of product. Those parts of the process all come with an incredible amount of data and systems and regulations and just permutations depending on the type of product you're making and selling that also make retail very, very difficult. So for someone outside of retail, if those pieces aren't something you've grown up with or you're aware of, you have visibility to some of it as a consumer. But I can tell you firsthand, once you've worked in retail, you never shop the same way again. There's just so much that I see now when I walk through a store and look at product on shelves, or I'm using product in my own home, or I see a trailer going past me on the road with a semi-truck full of product that's on its way to a local store. There's just places where my mind goes that I know that there's so much that goes into that. And not to say I'm an expert across all areas of retail, but it's like an onion. There's just more and more layers. And because of the complexity, even people in retail who have a very broad understanding often will specialize in one or two spaces and become and build expertise in those spaces in order to have the most amount of impact. There aren't very many generalist retailers. So for someone stepping in, making a product for the first time, it's a pretty tall order to be able to do that successfully and find the right partners and inputs and capital in order to be able to do that well.
I know you have consulting business, and that is also the reason why
Yes.
we are talking about it, and the reason for this episode. I would like to know when should business owner or director of the company approach you when they have a new product, or if they would like to improve their relationship with retailers. You work a lot on relationship, how to establish successful relationship with retailers. So who's your, let's say, typical client, and who would be your ideal client?
Yes. Well, thank you so much for asking that. Most of the work I do today is on the retailers side. So my ideal clients are mass and specialty retailers, and I support them as they're thinking about their total strategy when it comes to the vendors or manufacturers or brand partners that they work with. Who do we want to work with most closely? What are our big initiatives, and how do we share those initiatives with those key partners? So for example, if I'm working with a specialty store that's decided to develop a private label or an own brand business, I help them think through the strategy, how they're selecting their partners, how they're developing their product. And I really work with them as an advocate to think through how do we communicate internally and connect externally with those key partners find the right partners to build the product. How are we working together effectively? And then ultimately, how are we coming to an agreement, or how are we negotiating with them to align on the product and then the value that comes with that product? So whether that's the price or promotional strategy, and then make sure that that delivers the results that we're looking for. So that's the work that I love to do. I do work mostly in the US, but as I mentioned, I have had some clients externally.
So, sorry.
No, I was just going to add the way.
The perfect client would be someone from retail industry
Yes.
that has one or more shops that is looking to develop private label product.
That would be an excellent partner. Yes. It's usually larger than one or two shops. It's usually several hundred before you start to hit critical mass where private label is going to be meaningful and where I can step in and add value. When early on, very new entrepreneurs who are just opening shops, they are able to scale and do much of the work that I'm able to do themselves or with a smaller team. I'm able to support more enterprise-sized teams that have large cross-functional groups and need some support bringing together a process or an approach to building and executing the strategies that's challenged because of how large the organization is.
Okay, great. I will put your links in the description above so that potential clients can reach you. Is there anything else you would like to add? Any trade secret or any insights that you can share with us for the end of this interview?
Yeah, so I'm happy to share. And thank you so much for adding contact information. I do connect very freely on LinkedIn, so you can find me. I'm Juli, Juli Lassow, Lassow on LinkedIn. So please do reach out. I do have a lot of fun sharing insights regularly on LinkedIn, whether it's the private label space or sustainable or circular or zero waste insights. And you'll also find some of those on my website as well, which I know you'll put in the show notes also. I would say the insight that I would leave you with, what I've learned about relationships between retailers and suppliers, is something you touched on when you were introducing me. And it's something that I hold true to, that retailers and suppliers work best together when they share common business values and they understand each other's priorities. And so they're able to grow together in a really impactful way. And that doesn't mean that every retailer has that relationship with every one of their suppliers or manufacturers. But if you strive to identify who those partners are that are going to unlock the most value and have the most impact on your customers, that's really time well spent. And that's true on both sides, I would say, for the supplier or the brand partners as well. So time and time again, I see those deepened relationships bring outsized rewards. So I'd encourage you, depending on what part of the retail space you might be in, is think through how are you positioning yourself to either find those partners or be one of those partners. And it'd be really exciting to see where your business would go from there.
Thank you for these incredible insights. And thank you for being my guest tonight, Juli.
Oh, I appreciate it so much, Peter. Thank you for inviting me.